In the winter of 1959, deep within the frozen wilderness of the northern Ural Mountains, 9 experienced hikers vanished under circumstances so strange, so unsettling, and so inexplicable that more than 60 years later, the mystery still refuses to die. Some believe they were caught in a deadly natural disaster. Others claim they stumbled upon secret military experiments hidden deep within the Soviet wilderness. And a few insist that whatever happened on that mountain cannot be explained at all. What is known is this: on a freezing February night, 9 experienced hikers suddenly abandoned the safety of their tent. They fled into the darkness wearing little more than socks and underwear, despite temperatures approaching -30 degrees Celsius. Weeks later, rescuers would discover a scene that defied explanation. A tent sliced open from the inside, bodies scattered across a frozen mountainside, and injuries so severe that investigators compared them to the aftermath of a car crash. No one survived to explain what happened, and to this day, nobody knows for certain why they left that tent. This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident, one of the most chilling mysteries of the modern era. The story began in January 1959, when 10 young adventurers set out on a winter expedition across the northern Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union. They were experienced hikers, skilled in surviving harsh conditions and accustomed to long journeys through remote wilderness. Leading them was 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, a respected student whose name would later become forever linked to the tragedy. The journey was difficult, but well within the capabilities of the group. As they traveled deeper into the mountains, they documented their progress through journals and photographs. Looking at those photographs today is eerie. They show smiling faces, snow-covered camps, and friends enjoying the adventure. Nothing appears out of place. Nothing hints at the fate waiting for them. Before reaching the most remote section of the route, one member of the expedition, Yuri Yudin, became ill and was forced to turn back. It was a heartbreaking decision, but it saved his life. The remaining 9 hikers continued onward alone. Over the following days, conditions worsened. Snowstorms reduced visibility, temperatures plunged, and powerful winds swept across the mountains. Then came February 1st. At some point during the afternoon, the group drifted off their intended route and found themselves on the slopes of a mountain known as Kholat Syakhl. Its name carried an ominous meaning: Dead Mountain. As evening approached, the hikers made a decision that would later be scrutinized for decades. Rather than descending into a nearby forest for shelter, they pitched their tent directly on the exposed mountainside. They ate. They settled in for the night. And as darkness swallowed the mountain, the final chapter of their lives began. Sometime during the night, something happened. Something powerful enough to convince 9 experienced hikers to leave the safety of their tent in one of the coldest environments on Earth. No one knows what it was. All that remains are the clues. When the hikers failed to arrive at their next checkpoint, concern gradually grew. Search teams were eventually dispatched into the wilderness. On February 26th, they found the tent. The discovery was deeply unsettling. The tent was still standing, partially buried beneath snow, but largely intact. Inside were boots, heavy winter clothing, food, personal belongings, everything the hikers needed to survive. Then investigators noticed something extraordinary. The tent had been cut open from the inside. Several slashes had been made through the fabric, creating emergency exits. Rather than using the entrance, the occupants appeared to have sliced their way out and fled into the darkness. Why? What could have frightened them enough to abandon shelter, supplies, and warm clothing in sub-zero temperatures? The questions only multiplied. Footprints leading away from the campsite were discovered in the snow. They showed that the hikers had moved downhill toward a nearby forest almost a mile away. Some of the tracks had been made by people who were barefoot. Others appeared to have been wearing only socks. Despite the freezing temperatures, the group had left the tent almost completely unprepared. Following the trail, rescuers eventually reached a large cedar tree at the edge of the forest. There they found the first two bodies. The men were dressed only in underwear. Nearby were the remains of a small fire, suggesting they had attempted to survive after leaving the campsite. Branches high above the tree had been broken, indicating that someone had climbed upward, perhaps searching for the tent, perhaps searching for whatever had driven them from it. A short distance away, searchers discovered 3 more bodies, including Igor Dyatlov himself. The positioning suggested they had been attempting to return to the campsite. Maybe they believed the danger had passed. Maybe they hoped to retrieve their clothing and equipment. They never made it. One by one, they collapsed in the snow. At this stage, investigators believed they were dealing with a tragic accident. 5 hikers had apparently died from exposure. Then the remaining 4 bodies were found, and the mystery took a far darker turn. Nearly 2 months later, rescuers discovered them beneath deep snow in a ravine. Unlike the others, these victims had suffered catastrophic injuries. 1 had a fractured skull. 2 had sustained massive chest trauma. The force required to produce such injuries was immense. Investigators later compared it to the force of a serious car crash. Yet there was something deeply strange about the wounds. There was very little external damage. No severe cuts, no devastating bruising, no obvious signs of a violent struggle. It was as if tremendous pressure had been applied directly to their bodies. One victim, Lyudmila Dubinina, was missing her tongue, along with parts of her lips and facial tissue. Another was missing soft tissue around the eyes. Although later experts suggested some of this damage could have occurred naturally after death, the discoveries shocked investigators and fueled decades of speculation. Then came another bizarre detail. Some items of clothing recovered from the hikers showed elevated levels of radiation. The levels were not lethal, but they were unusual. Adding further intrigue were reports from witnesses who claimed to have seen glowing orange spheres moving through the sky around the time of the incident. Individually, each detail was strange. Together, they transformed the case into one of the most enduring mysteries of the 20th century. Theories emerged almost immediately. Some believed the hikers had stumbled upon a secret Soviet military test. The Cold War was at its height, and secrecy surrounded many military operations. Could the glowing lights have been experimental weapons? Could the radiation have been connected? Despite decades of speculation, no evidence has ever conclusively supported this theory. Others pointed to an avalanche. Perhaps shifting snow threatened the campsite and forced the hikers to flee. For years, this became one of the most widely accepted explanations. Yet, questions remained. The slope appeared relatively gentle. The tent was not buried, and many investigators felt the evidence simply didn't fit a major avalanche. In 2021, researchers proposed a more refined explanation, a rare slab avalanche. Unlike the massive avalanches often seen in films, a slab avalanche involves a dense block of snow breaking loose and sliding downhill. The researchers argued that such an event could explain why the hikers evacuated the tent, why they moved toward the forest, and even how some of the severe injuries occurred. For many experts, it is the most convincing explanation yet. But even today, not everyone agrees, because the Dyatlov Pass Incident exists in a frustrating space between explanation and uncertainty. Every theory answers some questions. None answer them all. What makes the mystery so haunting is that we know almost everything leading up to that night. We know who the hikers were. We know where they camped. We know where they died. But we do not know what they experienced during their final hours. Yuri Yudin, the lone survivor who turned back before the tragedy, spent much of his life searching for answers. He studied the evidence, reviewed the theories, and revisited the case time and time again. Yet even he never learned the truth. Before his death, he reportedly said there was one question he wished he could ask his friends. A single question that lies at the heart of the entire mystery. What happened that night? More than 6 decades later, the winds still sweep across the slopes of Dead Mountain. Snow still blankets the pass where the hikers made their final camp. And somewhere beneath layers of speculation, myth, and uncertainty lies the truth of what happened in the winter of 1959. 9 people entered those mountains. Only one returned. And the silence of Dyatlov Pass has never given up its secrets.